of space just for us in here. And if we're in a reverberant space or something like that, we don't excite it. So we're developing technology so that we can kind of avoid the kind of glass and marble.
Well, that's an interesting question. It's kind of like with cars. You know, we keep looking at cars and we see suspensions and tires and we think like, gee, that's always been that way. You know, it's been like that for 100 years. So as engineers with cars, you can either try to float the car with air or something like that, or try a new technology, or you can try to improve the technology around, say, a base system. In other words, like we know that you can add electronics to the suspension systems or make it more active, and so it's a question of when you look at technology, is that in speaker technology, in order to move air, you have to move something, okay? And various things have been tried, and experiments have been done. We've done experiments where you can ionize the air. It seems more interesting, but it's hard to contain the field. It's hard to make that work. It's hard to make that work successfully. Something more seems more futuristic. Is zapping the air, and you got ozone byproducts and things like that. But so it's kind of like the equivalent to floating the car on air. It kind of floats, but you get a lot of dust, and so I think when generally you get about a 20-year lead on technology that's developed, say, in a university or something before it gets implemented into production, things like that, so before it's innovative. So generally, there isn't anything that's really surfaced better than moving a transducer to create air movement, right? So what you have to try to figure out is how you can take that transducer and try to do it more perfectly. In other words, then you have a question like, what is that? So if in hi-fi, kind of like the hi-fi idea is that you would look at an instrument like a violin and say, okay, how can we make that violin sound the same through technology? How can we make a loudspeaker and recording recreate the violin? And so that's the goal. Regardless of what the object is, the speaker is is veiled, so you don't know what it is. So the goal is okay, how can we make the same listening experience? And in that quest, that's the goal. Then you start to look at how to achieve the goal. And one of the things that we've been working with the University of California on is we have this dome speaker that we've created that has 120 small little speakers on it. Every single one of those little speakers has an individual amplifier, and it all comes out and has individual DSP control. So what can be created with this dome is the simulation of a violin, because every note of a violin has a different shape, sonic shape. So you can try to do something like that to see, does this enhance the experience over something that's just reproducing all the sounds, but there isn't any shape to the thing. So I think those are the really important questions of what it is that we can detect and hear, or how we ever do the technology, rather than get lost in what's exotic technology. Like, really looking at why does a violin sound like a violin versus, because that's all you can really do is say, okay, here's the real violin and here's our simulation. It's all behind a curtain, and it's all behind a curtain. Are we simulating? Now we know with a real violin versus just any kind of loudspeaker, it's not exactly the same. So we're looking at, is it the dimension of it? Is it the fact that, like in France, they've recorded all of the polar patterns of a violin at every note? So this is research. Out of this research, that may teach us what we have to do. Now, do we create an ion field and scan it some magic way? Do we do it with hundreds of little transducers? That's just how you implement technology, but we don't want to implement technology and say, wow, this is really neat. We want to make sure that we've actually accomplished something. Otherwise, we add a lot of cost and complicated to something if it isn't goal-oriented. So I always like to get back to the fact that it's very difficult in an electronic world with electronic instruments to say what that's supposed to be. So it's easier to go back to an acoustical thing like a violin or a horn or a trumpet or something like that, and then see if your simulation duplicates it. Because once you know you duplicate something, then you can become creative. It's kind of like Leonardo da Vinci said, if you want to become a painter, you should learn all the master strokes first and then become creative. You know, that's one approach. And that's kind of more, I think we're more like that than trying to just be creative, you know, which is another path.
Why multi-channel formats have troubles in finding space in live events?
Well, the whole idea that with multi-channel is that what you're trying to do is in PA is you've got a, you know, you don't have, like at home you have a sweet spot, you're in a chair. So you can have a lot of speakers around you and you can hear the different speakers come at you and you can create a space on your chair. In PA, you've got people spread everywhere. So now if you have, say, a traditional left, center, right system, people near the right speaker, if you only put, say, trumpets over there, there's only going to be that group that gets to hear it. So this, you know, and then on the other side of the room, they'd hear the other speaker. The people in the middle would get the benefit of all of the stuff. So it's just a problem of that we don't know yet how to create, and we've tried this where you create like zones, like make little zones of stereo, you know, multi-channel zones all over the place, which gets quite complicated and a lot of speakers all over the whole space, you know, because you have to do it over and over, you know, and the more channels you do, the harder that gets. I mean, to do 5-channel for everyone in a concert hall means you'd have to have little clusters of these 5-channel things all over the place. Hard to implement, messy to look at. So I think that it's a question of we need another level of understanding of how to create dimensionality, which is what wave field synthesis and all this research is, how to create dimensionality so that everyone can experience that dimensionality. And that isn't quite practical yet. I mean, it's still in the very early stages of research, and it still has the same issues that you can get it to work, but you can have to stand in one place. So we haven't, you know, it's just a question of the technology that's available. In a movie theater, people are more trapped in a more narrow area, so it's easier to do. It's harder in a PA. It's a bigger balconies. You've got more space than, and in movie people, they generally put all the voices in the center anyway, so they don't really, they do, all the voices come out of the center channel so that everybody, so it comes from the center of the screen. They don't put, you know, you put the voice in the left one and that's where it comes from, and things like that.
Motivations behind Meyer?
Micah came from a request in the industry where we had a range of line arrays that we produced. Each one, the first one, the biggest one, came really out of our heads of creating kind of what we felt was like what we wanted to create as engineers. And then you release that, and they want something that doesn't weigh 200 kilos, and they want something that that truck packs, and they want something that they can use other than just parallel. So then you get the request, the feedback, and then so we start to create versions like the curvilinear array so that they're more flexible, and then the M1D, the smallest one, was developed for theater, so it had to be very small and had to be designed so they could do all those high balconies in some of those British theater houses where there's like, goes up forever, you know, things like that. But it wasn't quite powerful enough. Even though it was small, the architects like things that are small. Smaller, the more they like it. If it was invisible, they'd like it the most. If they couldn't see it at all, they'd be happy. So anything that gets into their space, they're less happy with. They forget that these spaces are actually designed for performances. Like an opera house is not designed for the architects and for the committee that raises the money to create them. They're actually working places with lights and sound and stuff. And so we're constantly fighting that battle. So we needed something small and compact, at the same time more powerful. So that's how it starts. And so then we develop transducers, there's weight limitations, so the technology evolves around the goal of what it is that we're trying to create. And so it kind of evolves out of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.